So let me please say welcome to everyone to our third working group meeting, but certainly the first of the working group meetings on open science financing and incentives. And this meeting is in the context of the implementation of the UNESCO Recommendation on Open Science. So before we start, let me just mention my name's Ezra Clark, and I am the Chief of Section for Science, Technology, Innovation Policy here in Natural Sciences sector in UNESCO. And before we start, you can see on the screen just a couple of housekeeping points. So please, when you're not speaking, please mute your microphone and keep your camera off to save bandwidth. And if you can please share your questions in the chat box, which you can see at the bottom of your screen. Or when the floor is open, please indicate you wish to take the floor by raising your hand, again, using the button at the bottom of your screen. So you probably saw the pop-up as you came in, but the meeting is being recorded. So just to inform you of that, and that the meeting will be held in English only today. So thanks very much. I already see we have 55 participants joining, and the number's just creeping up. So that's great to see such interest in this group. And as you'll have seen from the agenda shared before, we'll start with a brief background, and I'll apologise again for those who participated in previous working groups and have heard this before, but we'll get through that fairly briefly. And then after that, we'll open the floor for a series of short interventions, discussions, on the strategies for transforming research assessment systems, following a brief overview. And then we'll have a session on funding mechanisms. We will then move on to examine the objectives of this working group and really looking ahead to the work ahead of us and some next steps. So without further ado, I'll move along to this brief introduction and overview. So hopefully, as all of you know, in November last year, 2021, at the 41st session of the General Conference, 193 UNESCO member states unanimously adopted the UNESCO Recommendation on Open Science. And as many of you know, many were involved in the development of this. It was developed through a regionally balanced, multi-stakeholder, inclusive and transparent consultation process. And its adoption we certainly consider to be a historic moment. So for those who haven't seen it or don't have a copy, at the end we'll indicate how you can get hold of this, or we can provide you with the recommendation. Can we go to the next slide, please? So just really some of the very top level highlights of the recommendation. So it's the first international nominative instrument on open science. It contains the first internationally agreed definition of open science. It spells out the consensus core values and guiding principles. It addresses multiple actors and stakeholders of open science. It recommends actions on various different levels to operationalize the principles of open science. Proposes innovative approaches at various stages in the scientific cycle, and calls for the development of a comprehensive open science monitoring framework. So can we have the next slide, please? So let's just look very quickly just back at this definition. So this, as we said, first internationally agreed definition of open science highlights the fact that open science makes scientific knowledge openly available, accessible, and usable by everyone. It increases scientific collaboration and sharing of information for the benefits of science and of society, and opens the process of knowledge creation, of the creation of scientific knowledge, evaluation and communication to societal actors beyond the traditional scientific community. So if we move on now, please, to the next slide, which is the key areas of action, which are described by the recommendation. There are 7 priority areas, or areas which member states are encouraged to prioritize in their implementation of this recommendation. And to just go through those 7 very quickly. So it's The promotion of a common understanding of open science and its associated benefits and challenges, as well as the diverse paths towards open science. The second is to developing an enabling policy environment for open science, the investment in the infrastructure and services which can contribute to open science, as well as investing in training, education, digital literacy and capacity building, which enable researchers and other stakeholders to properly participate in open science. Fostering a culture of open science and aligning incentives for open science, and promoting innovative approaches to open science at different stages in the scientific process. And the last of these areas of action is promoting international and multi-stakeholder cooperation in the context of open science with a view to reducing the digital, technological and knowledge gaps. Next slide, please. So when we look at these recommendations, it's also important to look at not only the opportunities and areas of action, but also some of the challenges that we'll face or that may be faced. And those we can kind of categorize into five main areas, let's say. So one is this fairly significant issue of changing in the conventional scientific culture, the long-established scientific culture, the area of human and institutional capacity, the adequate infrastructure, and here it can be, as we say, rather serious things, or even down to basic things such as having decent and working internet conductivity. We can look at the area of incentives, particularly important today. So the evolution in the incentives for and revision of the current criteria for the evaluation of scientific excellence and scientific careers. And we hope really to focus on that in detail today. And then the final one is addressing any unintended and negative consequences of the open science practices. And on this chart along the bottom, you can see some, let's say, approaches or initiatives that can be applied to address these. And it's in this manner that we've structured the working groups for the open science implementation along the lines of capacity building, policies, financing and incentives, which of course we're discussing today, and infrastructure and monitoring. So we can see that in the next slide, please. So here really is just an overview of those 5 working groups. And here, as I said, we're in the third meeting, first one for this working group on financing incentives. And the deliverables, the aim for this working group ultimately, and we'll come to this following some of the interventions, is to end up with proposals for regional and thematic open science funding mechanisms and recommendations for revision of current research, careers assessment and evaluation criteria. So we will come back to the working group objectives, but now let's turn our attention to the discussion on funding and incentives. And the first part, or the first section of that in our session, in our meeting today, is strategies for transforming the research assessment system by aligning incentives for open science. And this is really to look at both opportunities and challenges. And for this, I'd like to please give the floor to my colleague, Anna Persic, who many of you already know, and she'll take us through this session. So Anna, please, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Ezra, for the nice introduction and background. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. It's great to see a big group again. We have now some 65 participants, so it's quite a good turnout. And we'll start, as Ezra said, with discussing some of the strategies for transforming the research assessment by aligning incentives for open science. Because as Ezra said, throughout the development of the recommendation, and also now that the recommendation has been adopted, one of the first and key questions that we receive in terms of how do we implement is that in order to be able to implement the recommendation and really put into practice open science practices in line with the UNESCO recommendation, there has to be a bit more of alignment of different incentives, particularly when it comes to transforming the strategies for evaluation of research careers and assessment. Before I introduce our panel and before I give them the floor, I just wanted to remind you, or those who haven't seen it or who do not remember from our recommendation, there are quite specific provisions and recommendations in the recommendation that that point towards aligning incentives for open science, and in particular those that deal with assessment of scientific contribution and career progression that needs to be changed in order to operationalize open science. So really this revision of research assessment and career evaluation systems is something that comes up very, very strongly in the recommendation. And it's the reason why today we are talking about this, and we have a specific working group on this specific issue. And the recommendation goes a little bit into detail as to what we are looking into with kind of new ways of evaluation and assessments, building on existing efforts to improve the ways in which the scientific outputs are evaluated. It mentions the DORA Declaration, the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, and we will hear about that. With this increase in focus on quality of research outputs rather than quantity, giving value to relevant research activities and scientific outputs, including the FAIR data and metadata and other outputs, so not just the publication in itself. Taking into account evidence of research impact and knowledge exchanges, so really looking into the process of producing scientific knowledge. And the fact that assessment of researchers against open science criteria should be fit for different stages of scientific careers, with some specific mentions for young career researchers. So this is just a little bit of a background from the recommendation in which we are having the discussion today. And I'm very, very happy to have very good speakers with us who will be able to introduce us to some of the initiatives that we have seen in different parts of the world, looking into review of research assessments and review of evaluation criteria for researchers. So we have with us Ms. Sarah Moore from the International Science Council, Ms. Sylvia Butaro from European Commission, Dominique Babini, who is here on behalf of Laura Rovelli, and Mr. Stephen Curry from the Imperial College of London. And each of them will give us a little bit of a flavor of the initiatives that they are involved with. And also we've asked them to give us a little bit of recommendations of how for us to move forward in this task that we have ahead of us. So I will start by giving the floor and the screen to Sarah Moore. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anna. And I have no slides, to be very postmodern. So, as Anna said, I work at the International Science Council. I'm a science officer there. But today I'm representing a trilateral initiative with the Inter-Academy Panel, IAP, and the Global Young Academy, the GYA. And we are in the process of scoping an initiative on research evaluation. So we're in the early phases of developing a project on behalf of our 3 organizations on research evaluation. We're still in this process of determining the niche in which we will work. And the scoping process, well, let me explain a little bit, perhaps for the participants who don't know so much about our organizations and the constituency we represent. The ISC is a membership organization with about 220 organizations, which are themselves national academies of science and professional disciplinary unions and associations. The IAP is also representing national academies, and the Global Young Academy is itself an academy of early career researchers. So we represent a very large international constituency of scientists all over the world, in different domains of science and at all career stages. And as an initiative that wants to represent such a large scientific constituency, our concern is to make sure that the scientific community has a strong voice in any reflection on reform of research evaluation. So that's the kind of interest in the place that we're coming from. What we've done in our scoping process over the past, well, let's say 6 to 8 months, was to put together an international scoping group, a 10-person scoping group, from various parts of the world in various disciplines and career stages, to scan the horizon, take stock of what's going on in the world by different actors, to brainstorm. And we also carried out a kind of regional consultation process, which was not intended to be very systematic or multi-stakeholder, but to help us get a better sense of the perspectives and the debates on research evaluation around the world, as the problems and the solutions are so often diagnosed and proposed from the global north. So the scoping process, which involved consulting really just a handful of scholars, thinkers, practitioners in research evaluation in the major regions of the world, was very interesting in pointing to the different kinds of perspectives and perceptions on research evaluation and the problems and potential solutions. And showing us really that whatever we do in research evaluation, in reflection on it or reform of it, really has to have a global perspective, has to take the global nature of the problems into account and be really very inclusive. For example, in some regions, evaluation of individual researchers was the key problem. In others, a much stronger emphasis was given to evaluation of institutions and university rankings. In all regions, the emphasis on quantitative indicators as being a major problem of research evaluation was emphasized. What we did with the inputs from that regional consultation with our scoping group was to synthesize them and to think about what kinds of activities could be undertaken by our 3 organizations that would go some way to getting to really putting the finger on the problems and the niche in which our 3 organizations could work, so representing a scientific constituency. And the activities which have been put forward as those which might build on each other, complement each other, and really merit action, and which were action orientated, ranged from some very deceptively simple activities to really quite ambitious and resource intensive activities. For example, even promoting DORA, helping organizations, institutions implement the recommendations of DORA, because there was a sense that practical guidance was actually lacking in terms of how to implement recommendations of DORA or the Leiden Manifesto or other principles which already exist. Promoting good practice within our own membership. We have many membership organizations, is also something that should be very easy to do, but in fact involves institutional change among hundreds of organizations, which is not easy to bring about. And at the other end of the scale of the activities proposed were global mappings of the debates, the problems, the diagnoses, the potential solutions. Because what we see internationally are indeed regional initiatives, very strong, very high potential regional initiatives with various actors in the research ecosystem, but no initiative that's really taking the entire research ecosystem and all the stakeholders really into account as equal players, or managing at least to get them all to the table and really in a global way. So there is, I think, still a gap there to be filled, and our organizations may try to fill this gap by launching regional and global conversations. So where we are in our initiative now is really formalizing the findings of the scoping process. We're writing up a paper which will capture, and especially try to capture that regional perspective and regional flavor to the understanding of the problems and the challenges ahead of us. And once that paper is finalized within the next couple of months, to decide as a trilateral initiative where to put our energies and efforts. And we do, of course, hope to work with the other actors in the system. We have already talked to the other speakers on the program in this session this morning and later on this afternoon. And we hope, of course, to try to find synergy with the work of UNESCO in implementing the Open Science Recommendation. So I'll leave it there for a presentation of the work that we're doing, and I'll be happy to come back in later with some more of the insights we gained from that scoping process.
That's great, Sarah. Thank you very much. And we're very pleased to have you here and really looking forward to the next steps in your initiative and try to kind of synchronize as much as possible with what we need to deliver. And when I say we, it's the UNESCO Secretariat, but also the member states and different actors that need to implement also the recommendations. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see these regional perspectives in the development of the recommendation. The regional perspectives were really very, very interesting and brought a lot of richness into the discussion. So we are very happy to continue this discussion with you as well. So I'll follow up now with our next speaker, Sylvia Butaro from the European Commission, who will also introduce us to a very interesting initiative led by the European Commission on the agreement on reforming research assessments. So Sylvia, if we can see you and hear you, that would be great.
Yes, hello, good morning, Anna. I'm not sure I'm not able to disable my camera. Let me just check and see. 1 second.
Maybe we can just
we tested it.
Make sure that, yeah, we tested it before. There we go.
Yes, you can see the presentation, right?
Not yet, but I hope that it will come soon. Yes, perfect. We can see you and we can see the presentation.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks very much, first of all, for the invitation, and good morning, afternoon, and evening as well to all the participants. And this is really an important opportunity for us as well to tell you about the work that we have been involved in the past months and the efforts and the state of play in really facilitating the development of a stakeholder-driven coalition on reforming research assessment. So I think there is a really broad agreement on the need for research assessment reforms for the reason that were already highlighted as well by the previous speakers. And as the Commission, we also carried out last year really very intense consultation with a broad number of research organizations, and this consultation were actually encapsulated in a scoping report that we published in November last year. This scoping report actually highlighted the outcomes of the consultation with these various stakeholders and pointed out really at the principles, the guiding principle that should guide reforms and changes to research assessment, as well as a possible way forward. And what we heard by many stakeholders we consulted is that the way forward that was seen to make progress in this area was really a stakeholder-owned coalition, bringing together different stakeholders. So the report was followed by a call for expression of interest that we launched in December last year. And actually, by signing up to this call for interest, organization committed to these guiding principles for reform contained in the scoping report, but as well to work together to co-create an agreement on reforming research assessment. And as you can see, this call for expression of interest was really met and welcomed very much by the community. We have as of today 334 organizations from 38 countries, but also international organization which sign up to this call, and have been co-developing this agreement over the past months. And you can see as well in this this slide, this is really representative from a wide variety of stakeholders that are responsible for the assessment of researchers, of research project, research units and research organization, and also the involvement of researchers, learned society, researchers themselves, because indeed their views are crucial and fundamental, and their voice needs to be heard because the changes that are going to be implemented ultimately affect them. Something to mention is as well that this course has not closed. It remains still open, so other organizations can join this process and the future coalition. And it is open not only to organizations in Europe, but also to organizations outside Europe and organizations with a global scope. And this is because while carrying out the consultation and implementing and drafting, co-designing the agreement, many told us, and indeed it makes a lot of sense that the changes that take place needs to take place worldwide. We need systemic changes to avoid fragmentation, and that's also really important for the mobility of researchers, but also for avoiding fragmentation in the global R&I landscape. So over the past months, as I said, these interested organizations have really participated in the process of co-designing and co-developing together an agreement. And this agreement actually, there is quite a broad consensus that we have achieved until now, and the agreement is now quite mature enough and close to finalization. And this was also thanks, I have to say, to the active engagement of all these actors in the process, all of those who joined and really committed and participated in quite in-depth discussion that we had on the agreement, what should have been included, the concrete commitments. So what the near final agreement looks and now, so the agreement builds, of course, on important initiatives like DORA and other initiatives, and contains 10 concrete commitments for change that signatory will commit to implement against, again, a concrete time frame for implementation. And also, the signatories of this agreement, of this future agreement, will also commit to mutually share with each other within the coalition, but also broadly with the entire community, how their lessons learned and experiences with implementing these commitments, and as well will establish synergies, the coalition, with other relevant initiatives in this area. So to respond to the question that was asked, it's not really a recommendation, but I will hint on how we see the synergy and the contribution that the agreement and the future coalition will give to the implementation of the UNESCO recommendation. So the commitments and that signatories will agree to really call for the recognition of the diversity of outputs, so beyond publication, but a wide range of outputs that the researchers contribute to, practices, including open science practices, teamwork, collaboration, and activities as well of researchers like societal engagement. So the agreement will call really for the recognition of this diversity of contributions of researchers and that improve the quality of research. And in particular, these will imply to base research assessment primarily on qualitative evaluation with peer review as central, supported by the responsible use of quantitative indicators. So again, we call here and the coalition and the agreement itself will really promote the responsible use and will try to avoid inappropriate use of quantitative indicators like publication and journal-based indicators. And importantly, the agreement will also respect the autonomy of organization and allow for differences in implementation. So the agreement will be flexible enough that organization that will implement the changes and the commitments will be able to make adaptations that are necessary to take into account the differences between disciplines, between different countries and cultures, but also mission of organization, different career stages of researchers. And then I was saying an important part of the agreement will also be the piloting of the changes, but also the sharing of experience and evidence mutually among the coalition members, but also beyond, so to help really and build collective knowledge on what is working, what is not working, and move forward collectively together. Now to conclude quickly on the next steps. So actually the agreement, as I was saying, is close to finalization, will be finalized during the next stakeholder assembly, which is planned for the 8th of July. And this year. So as I said, this will be the opportunity to present the final agreement, but also to continue discussion on what could be the governance as well, but also the future operation and organization of the coalition. This has not been set yet and is part of the ongoing discussion between the stakeholders. And this includes the operation of the coalition, includes also the mutual learning mechanism. So what will be the mechanism that will be used within the coalition to learn from each other and exchange experiences. And we expect the signatures and the official launch of the coalition to take place in the autumn. And as I was saying, this is the very good progress that we could achieve in this initiative is really thanks to the stakeholders. As the Commission, we are facilitating this process, but this is very much stakeholder-led. So we look forward to continue to collaborate with the other partners, but also with UNESCO and with this working group to see how we can mutually learn from each other and continue working together in this important area. So I'll stop here for the moment.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sylvia. I think that was a very nice overview of the initiative that you have been working on for quite some time now. And it's good to see it evolving and building up. We'd be very keen to learn about, what exactly are the key principles, what are the 10 commitments, and as you progress, how do the different institutions that are part of the coalition making sure to kind of put in place really and implement what needs to be done for those commitments to be implemented. So as you were saying, this part on learning from each other will also be very, very important, and we're very much looking forward to following this initiative more closely. But as I said, also to learn and maybe pick up some of the things from the coalition to also feed into this more global review of recommendation for review of research. And so thank you very much for that. Now from kind of Europe, we're going to move to Latin America, and I'm very happy to have Ms. Dominique Babini here with us, who is representing Laura Rovelli and Claxo Folek. And if you can tell us a little bit about the initiatives in Latin America, it will be great to hear more from you. So please, Dominique, you have the screen.
Thank you very much, Anna. Yes, sorry, I have to change. I'm downloading the documents which are mentioned. I'm going to share Laura Rovelli's presentation. She's at the conference of Claxo in Mexico now. Let's see if can you see the presentation?
Perfect.
Thank you. Well, we are in Latin America. Latin America is the region of the world with the highest percentage of its journals in open access. Those journals are published by universities, which also run the digital repositories, contributing both journals and repositories to bibliodiversity and multilingualism, which are two of the features promoted by UNESCO's recommendations on open science. Several countries in the region have issued policies, and one second, I have problems in advancing no, I have to go back and I have to share it in this way. Sorry.
No problem.
And now let's see if it lets me advance. Yes, now yes. Latin America has issued several legislations and policies to promote open access, but very slow advances in access to research data, preprints, and collaborative research with other societal actors. In some countries, there are advisory open science committees at the ministries of science, as is our case in Argentina, to adopt the recommendations just approved by UNESCO. Claxo started 3 years ago the Latin American Forum on Research Assessment as a regional space for debate and exchange on the policies and practices of research assessment processes needed to strengthen open science practices. Claxo-FOLEC works together with DORA, with the ISC Global Young Academy, Inter-Academy Partnership mentioned by Sarah, and works together with UNESCO and national research funding agencies in our region in conversation to improve research assessment. FOLEC Claxo has identified several main obstacles in research assessment and how to overcome them. One of the most pressing obstacles is about researchers being rewarded only when publishing in the mainstream journals with prestige industry indicators, making invisible other contributions which in some disciplines, as is the case of social science and humanities, can result in 80% of research output made invisible in research assessment in our region. Here, Claxo-FOLEC is promoting the practice of complementing Web of Science and Scopus indicators with indicators from the region, from the regional indexing services, and supporting COAR's project of next generation repositories, which will have peer review overlay services. In a recent survey by FOLEC Claxo with IDRC, survey of research funders, we found that several issues of importance in open science are starting to be taken in consideration when evaluating proposals for research funding, mainly issues related to equity, diversity, and inclusion of traditionally underrepresented scholars as women and young researchers, participation of other societal actors than researchers, and open access and open science promotion in the proposals. And an example, a commitment that research output will be and text will be available in open access. Here are two examples, one national and one regional in Latin America, of incentives in research assessment to enforce open science implementation in Latin America. The first example is our National Research Council in Argentina, where when evaluating social science and humanities, where nearly 80% is published within the region and not available in Scopus and Web of Science, then in that case, evaluators are asked to consider to complement Web of Science and Scopus with regional indicators. The second example is what we do in Claxo-FOLEC, working to build a regional consensus to promote changes in research assessment. Another research recently documented by FOLEC Claxo with UNESCO is about peer review trends and obstacles in our region and the need to move towards next generation repositories, which should incorporate peer review and value this contribution in research assessment. Thank you very much. And we in Claxo-FOLEC, we are very glad to work together with DORA, with ISC, Global Young Academies, and Inter-Academy Partnership, and with the Global Research Council. And we hope this will be the big family working together, as has been mentioned here, to improve research assessment, which is key for open science. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Dominic. This was very, very useful and a very good overview of what is happening also in Latin America. And great to hear that there are convergences between these different initiatives, meaning that in different parts of the world, there is the same the same needs. Some challenges maybe differ, but in general, kind of going towards the same goal. So thank you very much for that. And we have a last short presentation by Mr. Stephen Curry from the Imperial College from London, who is, I think, the current chair of the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment in DORA. Stephen, very good to have you with us. You have your 5 minutes to present DORA. Everybody already mentioned it, but it would be great to have a little overview of DORA and its stage, where it is right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you see my slides, or are you seeing the presenter view? You can see the slides?
We can see the slides.
Great. Okay, so I just have 4 or 5 slides to share with you. I thought I would just give a brief overview of DORA and what we're doing at the moment, and some reflections on how that fits in with the work that UNESCO is doing, and as we just heard, many other people are doing in different parts of the world. So DORA and open science, I think, intersect quite naturally. So I hope that actually this audience is quite familiar with DORA, the declaration. We are not very fond of journal impact factors and other aggregate measures when they are used and misused in research quality assessment or researcher quality assessment. And next year we'll be celebrating our 10th anniversary, and we're currently, rethinking our strategy and what our priorities are going to be for the next 5 years. So this is a good moment to be having this discussion around, what we are going to do as a global community. So we have a lot of support worldwide, 19,000 individuals, over 2,500 organizations, and we're supported, thankfully, by a number of international funders, and that allows us, and has allowed us since 2017, to have 2 members of staff. So DORA, people have heard of it, but we are a very, very small organization. But we have great staff. Anna Hatch is our program director, and Haley has the program manager, and Amanda is our current policy intern, and we're actually looking for a new intern because Amanda is moving on. So check the website for that. And we have very deliberately tried to take a global and worldwide view to this endeavor about reforming research assessment, because we know, as I'm sure everybody in this room is already well aware, there's no point trying to fix it in one part of the world, because science and scholarship in general are very much international endeavors, and what happens in one part of the world can often have unintended effects in other parts of the world. So it's really important for us. Now we have a steering group, and you can see the membership on the website, but we've made a very deliberate attempt to make sure that we have got good representation from every single continent on the globe. Our strategy for the last 5 years has been get more signatories, increase our global and disciplinary impact, and we hope we have gone some way to expanding our audience across the globe and across different disciplines. But one of the things we really have tried to focus on, and where there is still so much to do, is about developing and promoting, alternatives to the crude use of metrics, and thinking about what really does constitute best practice in research assessment. And in doing that, we very much have a perspective that is global, and we hope increasingly holistic. So there's a very natural intersection between efforts to reform research assessment and the drive worldwide towards more open forms of scholarship. Both are focused, to some degree at least, on the outputs, the qualities and varieties, and DORA is about recognizing outputs and contributions that go just beyond papers published in certain outlets. And open scholarship, of course, is about making sure that people share early and share more diversely the various products of research endeavors. And I don't have time today to go into it as well, but this very naturally also brings in questions about equity in research. And the whole open access debate has raised questions between the north and southern regions of the globe. But also, of course, the process of research assessment is itself perturbed by biases of many sorts. And the whole philosophy behind open scholarship raises really important and urgent questions about, who is permitted to join the worldwide scholarly community, and who gets recognized for their contributions. And history and analysis tells us, of course, that many groups have been and continue to be excluded. So we do need a holistic approach. So in terms of the work that we're doing to develop and promote good practice, it's about going out into the world and discovering, which funders, which universities, have already started to sort of make progress down this road, and we want to surface that and be an information exchange for it. So we have a resource library that we're building up and curating, and we've done a lot of work on that in the last few years. So I hope it's a more and more valuable resource for people. We create our own resources to some degree. We write short briefings, we write research articles, we convene conferences and workshops at other conferences in order to get this agenda on the table and get people thinking and working on practical alternatives to the misuse of metrics. And more recently, in collaboration with the European Universities Association and Spark Europe, have started a set of bringing together a set of case studies of organizations that have signed up to DORA and begun to implement it, and so started to go down the road of figuring out, in practice, what does this actually mean? I'm a great believer in the idea that nothing succeeds like success, and so if we can present stories of success to the world, then more people are likely to get over their initial hesitation, because I think there is clearly a worldwide desire to make a change and make a move, but a lot of participants are hesitant. So we're necessarily, of course, being a very small organization, we are very, very open to collaboration, and we have, I hope, a growing track record in working with other organizations. We've worked with the Royal Society to help develop ideas about using the narrative CV format, and we've convened workshops to look at the upsides and downsides of making that shift, because there's an important discussion about the practicalities. And we've worked with the Wellcome Trust in the UK on their open access policy, and also collaborated with the Global Research Council, which is obviously a network of national funders from around the globe, and trying to get the whole agenda of responsible research assessment onto the table. One final thing that we now do have a focus on that we hope will have worldwide impact is Project TARA. So TARA stands for Tools for Advancing Research Assessment. And so this is funded by Arcadia. And one of the key things that we are developing, and it's in the works now, we've just at the end of the first year of this project. So we hope to have a public version available later this year or early next year of an interactive online dashboard, which hopefully will then show where advances in research assessment are being made around the world. This will complement the work we're doing on case studies, and help to sort of point people in the direction where real change is happening. We're hoping that actually it'll become something that people want to be part of, and so institutions will be knocking on our door and saying, well, here's our policy or here's our practice, please add it to the dashboard, so that everybody can see that we're doing the right things as well. So it really is hopefully part of our efforts to discover and promote good practice around the world. So, we are very much welcome the initiative, warmly welcome the initiatives taken by UNESCO. I think that's symptomatic of a worldwide desire. And DORA, I very much hope, can play a very positive role in whatever lies ahead for the next 2 or 3 years. Thank you very much.
This is excellent, Stephen. Very, very nice presentation, and you managed to really capture a lot in these 5 minutes. So thank you very much for that. And we do have to continue this conversation to see how do we raise awareness of all of these tools and materials that you already have, because really there is already a wealth of information within DORA that I think can be very, very useful to different actors. We will pause a little bit this discussion for now on incentives and on research assessments. I'll hand it over to Ezra to start the conversation on funding, because we already started to have some overlaps between the two topics. So Ezra, maybe you can lead now the discussion on funding, and then we will have a bigger discussion on all of these different topics. So thank you very much to all our speakers for now, and we'll get back to you with questions and discussion. Ezra.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you indeed to all the speakers. Some very useful interventions and information there. So to enable us to, excuse me, to have all our speakers today, we're going to just adjust the agenda very slightly. So I will just pause for a little bit the introduction to this session, and to enable participation for in the context of conflicting or pressing other engagements. So if we'll have the question and answer combined for these two sessions, but now if I can please invite Miss Hannah Hope from Wellcome Trust, or Wellcome, I attempted to say Trust, the Open Research Lead to present first, then I'll give a brief introduction and then we'll come back again. So Hannah, please, you have the floor. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Ezra, and apologies to everyone for the shift in agenda. That's because I have to head off shortly. So for those who don't know, Wellcome, we're a global philanthropic funder of health research, and we've got a long-standing interest and advocacy on open science. So I think, as we're all aware, there are issues in how science is done, how it's supported and funded, delivered, irrespective of whether it's open or not. And so just making the existing system open is not going to fix this, nor is it going to give us the ethical, engaged and inclusive research that we seek and that is part of the recommendations from UNESCO. But every peso, rupee, pound, dollar, euro spent on science could be a peso or dollar spent on open science if we design, assess, and support the grant schemes, fellowships, and staff appropriately. Our experience at Wellcome is that through targeted schemes and prizes for the development of tools or supporting data reviews can be really successful. But when we've tried to add on or provide retrospective investment to standard funding schemes, they've been of limited interest to the wider research population and have often had limited impact. And we believe this is because these things need embedding in how research is designed, not just how research is designed, but how, as I said already, the calls are designed. And I think this includes thinking about open science as a form of interdisciplinary research, not just expecting single people to do all of these things, but to include the archivists, the data managers, the ethicists, the social scientists that are going to enable us to get inclusive, high quality open research that we can then reuse for maximum benefit. And I think we need to think about a similar approach when it comes to infrastructure, whether those are software and services that we are buying in and prioritizing the purchase of open services. And I use the term purchase there kind of loosely, but I just want to be clear that open does not mean free. But also whether it's databases and resources that we are using internally or that our researchers depend on. And I think particularly around infrastructure, I'd encourage us to try and spend more time thinking about ways that we can coordinate funding, that as organizations we can collectively contribute to the same resources and lower the burden for these individual resources in getting access to that funding. And sort of linked to that, I think we also need a consideration about how we can distribute globally the infrastructure that the scientific community depends on. How can we share out the skills, the hardware, and the funding for this infrastructure so that we get better representation in how science is governed, how the infrastructures are done, the kind of local and global priorities, but also thinking in terms of representation of the data that is included within those resources that we're all using. And so I've kind of whistled through that quite quickly, but I would say that the recommendations are a fantastic step forward. And really, I would encourage us all to think about how we can use our existing investments and to think of them as being an investment in open science rather than just assuming that we need to think about finding additional funding. Obviously, additional funds help. I'm not saying that they won't, but about thinking more about how we design the science that we are all doing and contributing to and assessing. So with that, I will say thank you very much for listening and hand back to Ezra.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hannah. That was excellent in a very short time. I think you've given us a very nice overview, and certainly this perspective from Welcome. So that's great. So if I may just ask if there are specific questions for you. I realize you have to leave now, but maybe we can forward those to you afterwards if there's anything specific that comes up in the discussion.
Absolutely. I'll be very happy to do that.
Thank you. Well,
and apologies again for running off.
No, of course, but thanks so much. Thank you.
And
Thanks
sorry,
very much indeed for that.
I can just say, Hannah, we will be counting on you in the work of the working group. I think the experience from Welcome, particularly in designing and using the existing investments to correspond to open science, I think this is something that many member states will actually look at very favorably. So we really are counting on your help in the future work of the working group as well. So even if you're leaving us now, hopefully you will be staying with us for the next few months.
Absolutely, very happy to be involved.
Great,
thank
thanks.
you.
Yeah, and certainly in the next session of this working group. So thank you. Thanks very much indeed, Hannah. Thank you. Okay, so we will now continue with the next two interventions on the funding mechanisms and outlook for future investment. So if I can now please invite Ms. Caitlin Turner from Open Research Funders Group. Ms. Turner, you have the floor. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Yes, so I'm going to, for brevity's sake, share a link to slides, but I'm not going to actually share the slides. So you're welcome to follow along, as well as the link to our website. Here you go. Okay, so I am representing the Open Research Funders Group, and as part of that, a specific project called Helios, and that's the Higher Education Leadership Initiative for Open Scholarship. And really what this is a project that's actually emerged from the National Academies, Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine's roundtable on aligning incentives for open scholarship. And as part of this project, it's a community of practice that has launched we have about 78 members now. They're heterogeneous institutions covering approximately 2.5 million faculty, staff, and students in the United States. And as part of this project, we have a theory of change that really is about mutually reinforcing vectors. And we've talked about this a little bit with incentives and now with funding. So it's really saying, how do we align why we do the work, so our values, with how we do the work, our practices, and then how that work is rewarded. And so that's through funding, but also through reappointment, tenure, and promotion, changes, et cetera. And as part of this work, we have 4 working groups, and this is really, Helios is made up of the senior leaders of higher education institutions in the United States. And so we have an institutional and departmental policy language working group that is looking to reform or create a roadmap to reform RPT in higher ed. And that is really to specifically incentivize, fund, whatever it might be, in order to advance open scholarship. And as part of this working group, we really have a framework that we're considering, since we're just at the beginning of these projects, where it's a commitment, action, and accountability framework. And so we know that every institutional context is quite different. What MIT, for example, can do might not be what another member could do. So what we're really looking for here is our leaders to make sure that they are really disseminating this information throughout their campuses, encouraging others in the United States to get on board, and then to actually do something. Our working groups are about action, not just coming and talking about the need for open scholarship incentives. And then again, as part of this, it's really about accountability. So how do we hold one another accountable as 78 institutions pushing forward collectively? And I'll just end really quickly on the fact that we are also at the same time really keeping in the spirit of mutually reinforcing vectors in support of open scholarship. The ORFG, as well as the National Academies, are hosting a convening of philanthropic and society leaders really at the same time to do similar work. And so this is the CEOs of several of the major funding agencies and philanthropic funders, as well as societies, are coming together to say, we will work on this at the same time. We will think about how we align what we fund in support of open scholarship to support you in doing this work. And this is the same for society funders or societies as well. And our funders are meeting next week for the first time. With that, I'm going to stop my piece, but I will share with you the link to our website, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Caitlin. That was, again, very quick, but comprehensive, and we got a lot of information there. So thanks very much. So as I understand it, you'll share the slides with us. So all the participants can look at those later. And I see, have you already shared the link to your website? Okay, excellent. Thanks very much. So, yeah, kindly, you said you're happy to answer questions. We'll just hold off on that for one more intervention, and then we'll open up the floor to questions for everyone. So once again, many thanks. And as was mentioned, we certainly look forward to continuing with you participating in this working group during our negotiations and discussions into the future. So excellent. Thank you again for an excellent presentation. And now the third and last of the interventions in this session, please, is Ms. Claire Redhead, the Executive Director of Open Access, the Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association. So please, Ms. Redhead, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ezra. Can you see my slides? I'm going to assume yes.
Yes.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to come and talk today. I've been asked to come and give an overview of open access funding mechanisms, and OASPA, our community, includes a huge diversity of approaches to open access. It's actually quite a challenge to keep track of them all, and I'm going to try and summarize the main ones. I'm just trying to move some of these boxes, sorry, that are in the way of my slides. Apologies.
We can't see the boxes, so they're only affecting
okay
you.
All right, they are covering up some of the things I was going to read, but never mind. Thank you for that. So first of all, I was just going to run through what am I talking about when I say open access. I know there are people here in the audience who do know open access very well, but I think it's helpful to clarify. So gold immediate open access is the main foundation that OASPA was built on. So the criteria that we have for publisher members is that open access content is immediately available at the time of publication. Now, this has come to mean many things to many people. It may or may not mean a fee is charged, but you know, in our terms, it just means something's immediately available and it's under an open license. So diamond or platinum is another term that's been introduced. This again is immediate open access, but definitely with no fee. Green, repository copies made available on a paywalled article. If that is the way open access is made, you wouldn't be eligible to be part of OASPA. So that to us is valuable open access, but not the core of our interest. Bronze, again, is another colour that's been introduced, and this is where articles are free to read on a publisher website, but with no open licence. OASPA, the definition of open access we use is that it's fully available for reuse, and the terms of that are clear. So again, that doesn't count as open access in our book. And then hybrid is another term you'll be familiar with. So this is open access on payment of a fee within an otherwise paywalled publication. So I thought it was just helpful to start with having all of those together in the one place. So open access journal funding models, the first two of these that everybody is very familiar with. So APCs have, you know, some of the publishers that started OASPA set up using APCs to make content open. It's not only large publishers that do this, so I have included a couple of well-known ones there as examples, but we have really small publishers and individual journals that are charging small fees to cover their costs. So it's a model used by all different kinds of publishers and scholars as well, so institutional based journals. And I think it's you know, obviously we know now that there are issues with equity with this model, but it was well intentioned when it was developed, and for some publishers it's difficult to move away from. So I've mentioned here there's some agreements being made, but these agreements are mainly around discounting. So it doesn't present an immediate solution for those publishers to move away from using that model. Transformative, transitional agreements, read and publish, publish and read. There's a whole different bunch of agreements that we all know about and think about with mixed views. They are typically made with the larger, I've termed legacy publishers here, who are trying to transition to open access, and with the learned societies. There's been some great work done recently to develop agreements for smaller societies. But I've specifically called out the Royal Society here because these agreements that they have made have enabled the Royal Society to commit to moving all of their content to open access. So there is a benefit to these agreements when they work well. And I think there is a recognition that the revenue may not be what it was. And I think there's some of the other societies, particularly in the Society Publishers Coalition, like the Biochemical Society, have had to address these kind of issues. But agreements, these kind of agreements are working for those publishers. There's some publishers that have adopted a membership fee, so where you would pay and you'd be able to publish multiple times, like PeerJ. Then there are subscribe to open, so that's famously used by Annual Reviews, and also the International Water Association, who's been able to completely transition to open access on that model. I think it's an equitable model because there's no fees involved, but of course it does, as many of these models do, really rely on goodwill. And I know that they do lose even long-standing subscribers sometimes, because obviously that content is then made available openly. Diamond is supported in a number of ways. So I've given some examples here. I mean, there's no author fees, but it may be that there's institutional support for journals which are run by researchers. And Latin America is a prime example of where that's working exceptionally well, and has it's been the model that we've all looked to. There's a huge number of journals supported in this way, and these were identified for those of you familiar with the Diamond OA study, which was carried out, commissioned by Coalition S last year, and now is leading on to an EU project which will look at developing capacity and better organisation of institutional publishing in Europe and beyond. University presses, of course, are another way that that Diamond may be funded. So UCL Press is an example there, where the university is committed to making publications available open access and covering the costs of those. And there's a number of collective support models. So I've given two examples here. Lyrasis, their open access community investment program is doing really well in getting funds from libraries to support journals with defined costs and terms, and JISC are also doing a similar thing in the UK. University presses, just to note, there's many examples of university presses where they're under pressure to be profitable. So I think UCL Press is a different example, and there's the new university presses that are being developed, certainly using a different model. But comes to mind the University of Adelaide Press, which was a member of OASPA until a couple of years ago, was seeing amazing usage of their books, but was not a profitable cost centre for the university, and sadly didn't succeed in the long term. So there's challenges. I know there's a couple of people from PLOS on this call. I do think it's worth talking about PLOS, just going back to the APCs and the unintended consequences that we've seen arise from APCs, and a growing concern. And so PLOS have two new models, one for their selective journals, their community action publishing, where the goal is to cover the costs and a small margin, and anything above that is passed back to members at the renewal stage. And it's, as I've said here, focused on making selectivity financially sustainable. And their global equity model is for their new journals, such as Global Public Health, and they have a tiered pricing model and a regional pricing structure, which are really worth a look. I think they're experimenting with some really interesting models here, whether being a non-profit makes this easy for PLOS, I don't know, but it's really fantastic to see them leading the way. And we, within OASPA, we have a working group looking at equity and open access publishing, where we're just starting to share experiences and help other publishers start to think about how they can produce more equitable models for authors. And then finally, I just wanted to very quickly draw together some examples from book funding. So again, there's book processing charges, which are a lot higher than article processing charges, naturally due to the cost and intensive book production process. But other publishers are experimenting with different things. So some publishers are using a hybrid model where they're selling print and making the digital copies open access, and there's a project which is looking at the impact of that on print sales. So I think there'll be some information about that available at the end of the year. There are consortium models, so library crowdfunding such as Knowledge Unlatched, membership fees. So Lever Press in the US is funded by 40 liberal arts colleges to make content open access, and Open Library of Humanities is another example. And then there's a group of approaches: Opening the Future, MIT Press's Direct to Open, and Michigan's Fund to Mission, which are all using variations on subscriptions to backlist of books to fund the cost of new titles. And then other publishers using a mixed approach. So Open Book Publishers and Punctum use a combination of membership models, donations, grants, and selling print copies as well to make sure that authors aren't having to be hit with the cost of publishing books. And then there's the Coping Project, which is also looking at sharing infrastructure so that small publishers can work together, and scaling small is the tagline, but to share services to be able to work together. And I think there's lots of experimentation going on in the book world, which is very interesting. And in particular, I think it's, books are more costly to produce, as I say. Long form works are typical of the arts, humanities and social sciences disciplines, which have much less funding. And so it's proving interesting to see how these, particularly collective models are coming together. So just, a final word from me related to the recommendation. All of these things that I've mentioned, support for open science and open access, it needs to be based on the right values, which the UNESCO recommendation has set out, and a long-term strategic approach needs to be implemented, because all too often these models and innovation in open research communication is funded by leftover money. In the time that I've been working on open access, which is a decade now, a lot has changed. A lot of these models are new, but really not very much has changed. And the money the money streams are still going in the same direction. So, I welcome these kind of groups thinking about funding differently. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Claire. That was excellent. An enormous amount of information there, and a lot of great detail on the kind of specificities and differentiation and explanation of the difference of the various models, and I guess the pros and cons of those, and I think interesting some of the unforeseen or unintended consequences of that. So I think certainly I will be happy to have the presentation and to look in more detail, but again to engage with you further, really for more detailed discussion on this. But yeah, thanks. That was excellent, very useful presentation there. So that brings to an end the kind of the three interventions in this session, and then, as we said, we will now open the floor to everybody for questions and answers. So please, there have been various questions in the chat, and I'll ask colleagues if there's anything specifically to ask if they mention that. Otherwise, at this stage, we'll open the floor, And if you wish to take the floor, please raise your hand using the hand at the bottom, and we'll deal with that. So maybe let's start with questions. We'll combine the two sessions together. So really, we're questions and comments on the two sections we had then. Firstly, on the strategies for transforming research assessment systems by aligning incentives, and then secondly more on the funding mechanisms. So I will now open the floor, and please indicate if you wish to speak. I don't know if I'm not seeing anybody.
I don't see any hands, but I do see an interesting conversation that has started, which is basically taking us to a second part of this, like the next session on what is the role of the working group and what could be some of the proposals that we can make for the as the working group. So there was a post in the chat from Miho Funamori. Miho, would you like to, from Japan, would you like to share your thoughts a little bit with the rest of the group?
Yes. So hi, I'm Miho, and I'm based in Japan, and I work at the National Institute of Informatics, which is providing open science infrastructure to the Japanese universities. But my point is I'm a professor in higher education research, and I'm always thinking about how the universities or higher education and society should relate with, or how it has changed in the last decades. And what is discussed in the higher education research is always that the higher education has changed from elite university to mass access and universal access. So it is more open to general citizens, and that the nature of the university also changes based on this broad change. So the university management change becomes more bureaucratic and systematic, and also it tries to address the students' needs, and the students are not only just elite students, but they are more diversified, and you need to address the diverse student needs. This discussion has only taken place in educational functions of universities, but I see the open science movement as a kind of massification of research function of the universities. So the university research function was a very, very narrow academic interest-based thing. But now when so many people join the universities, and also the universities are funded by the people's taxpayers' money oftentimes, and certainly the research projects are funded by the taxpayers' money. We need to address the taxpayers' needs when we choose the research topics. We are not living anymore in the medieval ages, where researchers could choose any topic what they liked. We are paid by the citizens to make research. So our research needs to address the society's needs. But what is happening right now is when research projects are chosen, which projects needs to be funded, the funding agencies are having kind of a peer review funding process where only academics look into the research project proposals and choose which research to be taken forward. So this means that when we are choosing the research projects, there is only academic interest involved. But for the outputs, we are demanding from them that it needs to have societal impact, and that it needs to have open science practices and so forth. So there is a kind of a mismatch for what research we are choosing and how we are assessing the research outputs. But in broad sense, research needs to change from academic interest-based to the society interest-based research. So my proposal is that we need, instead of just changing the research assessment for research outputs, we should also change the way, what kind of research project we are choosing, and have some citizens or societal voice get involved in the funding reviewing process and make the research more broad and open to the society, and maybe also have research projects with the society and for the society. That would be my point.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Miho, for that. We'll certainly, yeah, people can respond and react to what you said. I see Stephen Curry there. I saw Robert Giesman had requested the floor before. I don't know if you still want the floor. I don't see the hand. If you do, please speak.
Yeah, the question was about the working group, and I understood that will be covered.
Okay, if it's on the operation, yeah, that we'll move to that after this discussion. Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. So Stephen Curry, please.
Very briefly, because I have already spoken, obviously, but just to respond to Miho's suggestion, I do think it's a very interesting suggestion, and there's a lot of promise in it. It already works, I think, for some medical research charities. They have patient representatives on their grant funding panels, and so they are inputting into the decision making. And from my point of view, this is something that certainly in the UK I would like to see funders experimenting with. I think if it's introduced rather swiftly, you'll get a very strong back reaction from the academic community. And I think the question of academic freedom is rightly cherished. And I think there is value in allowing academics who are experts in the subject areas to set their research questions, while at the same time, I think there are other ways as well to encourage them to take a more holistic view of what a quality research output looks like, and having an eye to the impact in the real world, which is, I think, something that we have lost sight of because our research assessment processes are predicated too much on publishing in journals, and so journal outputs are seen as the thing rather than saving lives or making people's lives better. I mean, we have seen a natural impulse to opening up during the COVID pandemic, and we have seen a couple of other initiatives for other public health crises where the publishing and research community has come together to release information early. But if we do that in an emergency, my question is, well, why are we not doing that when there isn't an emergency? We've got, climate change and energy, and decarbonizing the economy, and there are so many questions with our public interest, and we do have to be mindful of that. So but I think there are multiple different ways. But on the particular question of academic freedom, which comes up in relation to this, but I think it also comes up in relation to helping to clear the space for open science and to normalize it. And one of the pushbacks against open access from some quarters has been that, oh, this infringes, when there are mandates, this infringes my academic freedom because you're telling me I can't publish in certain journals. And I know UNESCO in the past has done work to try and define what academic freedom is. And I just wonder whether, in the next few years or maybe beyond, then perhaps a refined and more articulate version of what academic freedom actually means that thinks about the consequences for open access and open science, and that's articulated more clearly so that we don't give this excuse to people who say, you're infringing my academic freedom by telling me I have to publish open access. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Stephen. I think now, can I, if there's no other hands raised, can I ask, please?
Question, Ezra, sorry,
yeah,
if I may.
Please go ahead.
Interesting, in the chat from Ian. Maybe you would want to pose the question to the group, because I think this is actually where some of our issues are. So Ian, please, if you can just share with the group your question. It was addressed to Sarah Moore and Stephen, but I think anybody who has a reply might chip in for the reply as well.
Okay, thank you. I'll quickly ask my question. So it was in reaction to Sarah's presentation. I thought the observation that Sarah made was really interesting about the absence of an international, or I think you said whole ecosystem effort on research assessment reform, sort of not seeing anything like that happening. And I also observed, looking at Project Tara, that seems to be regional or very institution specific examples of good practice. So it looked like there was a bit of a common theme of a lack of a sort of international framework or effort. So I was just, that sounds very exciting to me. And I just wondered if you have thoughts on how that might work, or what the next step might be.
I can maybe talk a little bit more about Project Tara briefly. I mean, so one part of the project is looking at the way that research assessment is conducted in United States institutions. And so there is obviously a focus there. That's partly because we've seen that relatively few American universities have actually signed DORA and started down that track. So we kind of wanted to explore why that is. We've seen very strong uptake in Latin America and in Europe, for example, but not so much in other parts of the world. So it was to explore that. But the dashboard idea, which is about trying to track developments in adoption of and improvements in responsible research assessment, that very much has a global aspiration. And so we are very keen to pull out examples from all over the world with regard to that. In terms of providing an infrastructure and a sort of a global set of I guess criteria and guidance on what does responsible research assessment look like. Well, I think we fall into the trap that there isn't an organization for global governments. Obviously, UNESCO has a very important role. The Global Research Council has got representatives potentially from every nation on Earth, but I think it has 150 plus representatives within it. In DORA, we aspire to be global, but we are tiny. So in terms of capacity, then we are extremely limited. But I think obviously conversations like this are going to help set the landscape, as the GRC is, and they have a working group looking at, well, it's looking at responsible research assessment, but as we've seen, and as many people have seen, that draws in open science very, very naturally. And so it becomes very much an automatic part of the conversation. And the European-led project, which has got a European focus, but is actually drawing in institutions from outside Europe as well, is trying to create a community of practice to, again, share expertise and hopefully move the needle and get some way down the road in terms of adopting better practices around. I mean, it is focused on research assessment, but again, as we saw with the UNESCO report, the link with open science is very, very intimate. So I don't think we're there yet, but I think clearly there's an appetite to get some kind of international coordination on this.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephen. So the question was also addressed to Sarah Moore as well. So Sarah, she's still here. She had to leave. Okay.
But I see that Sylvia has her hand up, so maybe she would want to.
Sylvia, please.
Yes, just wanted to complement indeed what Stephen said, that it's indeed that in the initiative, it's okay, it's true that the focus has been mainly on Europe now because it started from Europe, but the aspiration is as well that the coalition is open, as I was saying, as well to organization outside Europe, organization with a global scope. So indeed the call is open, and we hope the opportunities as well of this working group will help to establish synergies. We had a lot of talks, and DORA is also one of the members of this stakeholder assembly and of the organization that have been contributing to the drafting of the agreement. We had a lot of talks with Stefan, but also other organizations in the chat to try to establish synergies between initiatives, and that's quite important. And we look forward to this group as well, not to create silos, but indeed understand how initiative in different regional parts of the world can complement and work together with each other.
Thank you very much.
And Dominique.
Very much with this idea of complementing each other. Complementing all of our initiatives, because if not, the critics come, oh no, this represents governments. No, this is only science community. No, this is only Latin America. No, this is only European interests. So if we build an alliance of initiatives, regional, international, then there will be no way out, and the work will be undertaken, because it will be a united voice, an alliance of voices representing governments, science community, regions, subjects. So very good. Thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you very much. If we don't have hands, I suggest we can put some questions which were created really to guide us a little bit to try and look at some of the issues and discussions for today. We have another hand. Let's do that first before. After that, Anna, maybe if you could show those slides.
Yeah, maybe go a little bit more into the objectives of the group.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll cover that. So it's Ish. Yeah,
Ish, please.
Okay, thank you. In terms of open science publishing, I was a editor-in-chief for an Elsevier journal for the last 4 years. I gave up this year. It's not only a question of academic freedom or anything like that. There is a business case of the publishers. There is money issues. So I'm wondering whether open science initiatives, incentive thinking is going to involve some of the big publishers, Elsevier, Springer, and those kinds of group, and get their thinking on what are their limitations in terms of producing more open science publications or open science papers. Because at the moment, if you want to publish open science in the journal I used to be editor-in-chief, you have to pay. And that's not terribly exciting. Most of the time, if you have a institutional backing, the institutions might pay. And very often, if you have special issues, then there is some kind of a group structure, so they can pay. But if you are an individual researcher, it's not easy. It's not only a question of academic excellence or freedom, it's also, there's a business case around it.
Yeah,
thank you.
I agree, Ish, Ezra, if I may. Yes, this is one of the issues that we are facing in the open science ecosystem. And maybe Claire, do you wanna respond with regards to the yes.
It is the difficult issue. So open access, our OASPA's mission is to make open access the predominant model of publication, but there's caveats around that of not open at any cost, and not, I don't mean actual cost, but we want to get to a future where it's better than the one we're moving away from, where people can't read and access information, but we don't want to end up where people can't publish and contribute to the discussion wherever they are. So this is one of the motivations behind this group that I've started, where we're just beginning a frank and open conversations with publishers about what equity means to them and what their challenges are in the models that they have, and moving beyond that. And I think it reminds me really of the early days of OASPA meetings, where publishers were sharing information about how to publish open access and how to just make that work. And now we're on to this next challenge. How do we make sure that if we want open science and we want open scholarship, that we're not just creating new barriers in place of the old ones. So I don't have the answers, unfortunately. There's lots of heads working together on this to try and think how we can have a better future.
Thanks, Claire. And I see in the chat from Ed and Chloe O'Donnell from Springer Nature, interest, of course, in transitioning to open access. So I don't know, Chloe or Ed, if you want to add anything to the conversation.
Hi, I'm Ed here from Springer Nature. I'm the director of Research Environment Alliances. My job is exactly to engage these sorts of issues. How do we make research more open? How do we make it more equitable? How do we make it more robust, improving research integrity? And yeah, we're really, really keen to work out ways in which we can sustainably improve the access and equity of research across the board. There aren't any clear, easy, obvious answers, but I think we'll get there. We just need to be, everyone needs to be part of the conversation. So I very much welcome what UNESCO is doing. I think it's really an important framework for enabling all of us to get to this bright future that we have for science and research more generally.
Excellent. Ezra, I don't think we can hear you.
No, but I was waiting to see if we have any more hands raised, which I don't see we do. I don't know if there's anyone who's made a comment in the chat that wishes to mention it. Or if you want to pull something out.
We have a comment from Kazuhiro, which I think might come in nicely also when we present a little bit more about the working group and the next steps. Then maybe we can pull it out from the conversation. So maybe at this point
let's do that. Yeah, can you please move on and present that a little bit? That may prompt a little bit more discussion in those areas and those main questions. So I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Okay, great. So let me just share my screen. Sorry, it's not pulse. So just to talk a little bit about, you know, what Robert was asking and what are the objectives of the working group, what are the working mechanisms, etc. So putting it back into the context, the recommendation was adopted in November 2021 at the level of the Secretariat. UNESCO is trying to understand how we can best support our member states in the implementation of the recommendation. And what we have kind of decided is that, and based on the requests that we get from member states and different actors, is that for the moment, they need a lot of support tools, A, to understand exactly what is in the recommendation, and B, some guidelines, proposals, recommendations to be able to implement the different parts of the recommendation. So we've developed these working groups, which are open-ended, bring together people who are interested in the subject. Even if you have not been part of the working group today in this meeting, you can still be part of it later on. We really want to have it as open, as inclusive as possible. And this particular working group, for the moment, we see the membership as in people who have registered for the first meeting for the moment. We had 160 registered, and I think we had some 75 people actually connected in the meeting, over 39 countries, and really representing all kinds of different actors from universities and research institute, research funders, National Academy of Sciences, Association of Universities, librarians, data organizations, publishers, citizen science group, NGOs, permanent delegations of UNESCO, and also national commissions for UNESCO, and some regional and international institutions. So we have a very broad composition of the working group, which is very useful for us because A, we want different regional perspectives, but also different kind of thematic perspectives. The key objectives of this working group is really to come up with some proposals for regional and thematic open science funding mechanisms and recommendations for revision of the current research careers assessments and evaluation criteria. So these are the two, these two objectives are taken exactly from the recommendation. There is a recommendation in the recommendation for both of these objectives, and we're trying to propose something to member states that they will also at a certain point have possibility to comment on, and then if it's something that they would be comfortable with, then they can also apply it. So our idea is that we get as much as possible inputs in June and July. And then in September, more or less, we have some first drafts of these two different deliverables, let's say. And then by December, we maybe finalize something that we can then circulate with member states and get their feedback on that. So really the questions that we would want this group to answer, and we will have a little bit of time now, and then we will actually ask you to provide us with those answers so that we can put them together in the draft proposal to be discussed in September at the second meeting, is what are these existing open science funding mechanisms? What works, what doesn't work? What are some possible proposals for regional open science funding mechanisms? Who would be the key players? Are they even necessary or not? Are there some good examples, again, at regional level? Proposals for thematic open science funding mechanisms, would that work? And if so, thematic based on what? On the different elements of open science, the different actors, or other ways of kind of having these funding mechanisms by theme. And then in terms of the review and research assessment, same thing, looking into the different initiatives already existing on reviewing research assessment and career evaluation in line with the open science principles, and then these recommendations for the revision of current research assessments. And already from some of the discussions of the group, we see this need for kind of an international framework, which is where UNESCO again comes in. And we would be very happy to get some feedback from you and some proposals and some ideas on how that can be done. And of course, we are open for other questions that you feel are important, or other proposals and suggestions and inputs that you feel are important. So I'll go to the next steps right away, and then we can have a discussion in the next 10 minutes before we close. So on all of these different questions that I propose, what we would like to suggest is, of course, having an initial discussion now, but then to share your inputs, proposals, and recommendations with us on our email openscience@unesco.org by 15th of July, so before everybody goes for summer holidays. And then we set up a meeting around the 20th of September again, where we would be preparing maybe some drafts if we have enough material from you and from some research that we also have to do, to have some drafts to share with you, first with the group, and then we'll open up to a bigger constituency for comments and inputs. So this is a little bit what our ideas are about this working group, but we are happy also to hear from you if maybe there are some other needs, if maybe there are some other ways to make this work relevant, not just for us, but also for you. So happy to have this conversation right now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and maybe open for discussion. Ezra, if you agree, I think we can.
Yeah, please, yeah, you carry on if you take the questions for this.
So if there are any questions or any proposals at this stage, or any ideas, we are very happy to take them on board. Consider them now. And again, we will be sharing the report of the meeting, the recording of the meeting, the presentations of the meeting, and all these questions with you by email as well. Any comment or feedback at this stage? Maybe I go back to Robert and ask if that makes sense and answers his questions.
To be very honest, like I missed the last minute because of connectivity problems, but before you said, like, we will prepare proposals and deliverables, and would that be you, like you synthesize it, or we all write it collaboratively together?
As we said, the Secretariat here would collect all your inputs that you would share with us. We will prepare a draft that then the group can work on collectively. We have to synthesize it and finalize. And then, as I said, we share also with our member states for their comments, revisions, and with a bigger group that has been involved in the development of the recommendation, just to keep the process inclusive. And then we see what comes back and what we share with the member states in the end.
Yeah. And because you said member states, are they like, do they want to be part right now, or is it always?
We
like
have some
separate?
member states who are part of the working group. We have some delegations. We have some people from the different ministries. So
Okay, cool.
it's an open working group with different actors on board, and we're actually very happy to have them all on board to get and capture these different perspectives. So the idea is to be multi-stakeholder from the beginning, and then see what we come up with collectively. Good. So if that is clear, any other questions? I'm trying to see. Okay. Stephen, would you like to share some of your first initial ideas?
I think I've talked too much at this meeting, so I don't want to bore people. But we were offered some questions to reflect on in preparation for the meeting. The first being how to foster a culture of open science and aligning incentives. So there's a question of open access mandates is one part, which has been controversial in some regions, but obviously part of Plan S. Academic freedom I've already spoken of. I do think, and coming back to the point about, creating a space for open science, it really is, I mean, getting the public on board is really, really important. I think if more members of the public knew what the academic community was up to in terms of delaying publication because they were going through multiple rounds of peer review because they were chasing after a particular journal impact factor, and I've seen cases where it took 18 months to get a piece of work that was finished and written up published. And I think if the public knew that we were doing that sort of thing, they would be rightly outraged. So I think we need to tell them that sort of thing is happening, and then they will bring pressure to bear, and that will help to get them on side. Clearly, there's a case for including openness as part of criteria. But again, as with the discussion on decisions about grant funding, I think that conversation has to very much involve the research community, because I think there is a certain view. They think, oh, these people, they're so enthusiastic about open access, they forget about everything else, and so they just say, well, if it's open, then we'll publish it, or we'll fund you, or whatever. And I think generally there is a very strong and shared interest in recognizing and rewarding people who do really good work. Okay, that we don't want to fund people who are going to do mediocre stuff, and so we do have to make clear decisions. But openness is part of bringing the real world impact, obviously, to the game. I think, I mean, I'm not going to solve this one today, or maybe not even in 6 months' time. But in terms of establishing regional and international funding and basically having a core infrastructure, I mean, I liked Hannah Hope's idea that really have to consider this as business as usual. So it has to be built into the way that we fund research around the world in different countries. And so it just has to be seen as part of one of the core costs of doing research, is making sure that the results can be openly shared as quickly as possible. I think we have a lot to learn from Latin America with regard to diamond open access and a community-led enterprise that is really serving that region well. There are enormous challenges for the Northern Hemisphere about introducing diamond open access models, and we heard a little bit about that from Claire. In regions where commercial publishers frankly do dominate and do have a big sway in the way that the conversation is generated. And I think the community has kind of lost out a bit there, but that's going to be a very tricky debate. So there are different challenges in different parts of the world, but I think we're in the process of asking the right questions, at least.
Great. Thank you very much, and again, we are really looking forward to your active conversation and inputs into the working group. Miriam Kip, I see you have your hand up, please.
Yes, hello, thank you for this lovely 2 hours. It was very interesting. I'm from Berlin, from the Berlin Institute of Health. We have implemented or tried to implement open data as a open science performance criteria in the assessment of individuals, but also in the assessment of whole departments. And would this report also include the development or suggestions for concrete performance criteria for openness? Because at least we find it very hard to offer these to the research governance departments or to the different funding schemes. It's easy to say openness should be in there, but then it's hard to define it and have a validated criteria. So would this be part of the report as well?
Yes, that's a very good question. I mean, the recommendation already gives a lot of criteria. It did take 2 years to put it together with a lot of different people who really wanted things to be quite clear. What do we mean when we say certain things in the context of open science? So there is a lot there in the text of the recommendation, but I think our role right now is to take it out and to really put it in the context of, in particular, what you were saying here. So what does that mean when you actually want to implement something? And I like, for example, OASPA has been working like on a guide for open access publishers based on the criteria in the UNESCO recommendation. So they have basically just taken out all the criteria that are already there and just put them in the context for the open access publishers. And I think we can do that for different aspects of open science. It's a work that has to be done at different levels, but a lot of things is already there. And then what isn't there, because there are gaps, absolutely, and we absolutely did not have all the information, and it evolves very quickly, and there is all kinds of different initiatives happening constantly. We can adapt it or create some additional guides and guidance also. And we've also launched a call for best practices, because I think this part of how do you define criteria, who do you involve when you do that, who decides, this is also one of the things that we would like to see as part of best practices in open science. So it's not just what you have as an end product, it really is what's the entire process of getting to something that will then further open science. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of a reply to your question, but this is, I think, the role of these working groups is to take out the things that are in the recommendation, flesh them out, and then see where the gaps are, what the needs are, and possibly provide some recommendations on the way forward. Thank you. I also had the comment from the colleague right before the Kazuhiro Hayashi, talking about a little bit on peer review and how that also connects into the review process. I don't know, Kazuhiro, if you want to say a few words before we close on this topic, and then maybe we can start closing.
Yes, thank you for introduction. I'm Kazu Hayashi from National Institute of Science and Technology Policy from Japan. And yeah, this is just for seeing the future of this working group. And as you know, we are somewhat confirming that we are seeking the future vision of open science and what is research, and what can we do for promoting that kind of new design of research self. That is the essence of the open science funding mission. And then going back to the assessment of research output or any, and one of the practical transformation represented by the preprint trend. This is my opinion, and preprint is changing the scholarly communication itself, but it's very difficult to evaluate the preprint at its existence because it is not peer reviewed. But But it's changing the world, let's say in the deep learning world, or let's say the COVID-19 world. So, my point is we promote to transform science itself, and we have to promote the transform of science communication itself. Based on those situations, we have to fund to promote such kind of activity or trends. So, it is ambiguous to discuss about the future of open science, but preprint is one practical good case topic for us to confront with those those kind of challenges towards open science assessment. This is my opinion. Sorry, in my poor English, but anyway, that's my point.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. And we had a lot of these conversations also while the member states were negotiating the text of the recommendation, and there is some connections also with the peer review, because it is an important part of the openness process.
And hopefully we will invent some new methodology of not peer review, but filtering something for research output. And and that will be enjoyable, I think.
Absolutely. Thanks. Thank you very much. And this also goes, I also saw the question from Miho. What do you mean by open science funding mechanism? Is this narrowly funding open science projects, or is it considering open science practices in reviewing research proposals by academics? I think these are some of the fundamental questions to which we can provide some answers in these deliverables and in these guiding notes or supporting tools for our member states. Because while I agree, I mean, what again from the feedbacks we've received is that there is no need for kind of open science has to be included into the way we are financing science already, but it cannot be completely business as usual, because it would be very difficult to make this cultural change for open science if we do everything exactly as it was done in the past. So hopefully the working group will give us some point there as well that we can discuss at the next meeting. So I don't see any more additional comments. I don't see any hands raised. So Ezra, maybe we can just, close the meeting here if there is nobody else who wants to make any comments.
I think so. Yes, we've thanks very much, Anna, and thank you everyone. We've reached the end of our time, and we appreciate everyone who's pressed for time. There's many other things to do. So as we said, this is the first of the meetings. Lots of questions have been raised. There's many huge amount of information. We've heard many different perspectives and opinions, and lots of questions and ideas for us to discuss. So certainly there's going to have a lot more discussion as we move forward. So we'll bring these up. We'll go through the chat as well and raise these questions, and we'll share the means for you to provide us with more information. So we'll communicate that. So in the interest of time, we won't spend any more wrapping up than that. Just really to say thanks very much for the interest. We were very pleased and encouraged by the 60 odd people that joined this meeting, and thanks for your active engagement and information you provided. So really thanks so much, and we look forward to our continued discussions and information from you as we move forward. Thanks very much. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.